Today's topic to start, we're going to focus on leadership, zero trust compliance, and business outcomes. It's a really simple goal, and is to show how we move from using a bunch of scattered tools and individual tools into measurable results. So we'll get started here. Quick on me. I work in a lot of different areas. I really work in the intersection of engineering, incident response, security operations, and internal IT infrastructure. Um, I've done over 250 different incident response engagements almost in the last 10 years. It's been quite a bit, from ransomware containment to recovery to rebuilding. I've done MSP consulting, MSSP consulting with service design, playbooks, delivery alignment. And the goal, is really to have consistent outcomes across clients, aligning the tool set. And so that really helps put a different viewpoint for me in, because I'm not just on the leadership side. I'm seeing from a service provider, I'm seeing from the leadership, I'm seeing from an engineer's standpoint, from a tech person, and so forth. So it's what leaders expect and what operations we can deliver. So the theme for today is to align leadership, compliance, security, so we can deliver outcomes rather than noise, to our organizations that we do work for. And there's my fancy bat signal that I typically get called into, for emergencies. So we'll start off, Andy, with our first poll here. So what is your biggest security gap today in your organization? Leadership and alignment and accountability, compliance readiness that actually works, zero trust adoption, or connecting security to business outcome.
And we've heard that if you're on a mobile device, you may not see it pop it up on screen. That's why Matt's got it on the slides. And if you are, you can feel free to drop an answer into the chat as well. But it looks like compliance readiness that actually works has one more vote than...
They're tied. They're tied now with leadership alignment.
Now. Yeah. All right. As we come around that final furlong towards the finish line. Oh, leadership alignment takes a small lead as we come up.
You can go ahead and end that, Andy.
Yep.
Right on.
Get the poll out of my side.
Is that on your way now?
Okay, so here's a very common pattern that we typically have seen in organizations, that we chase symptoms and not the root causes. And sometimes that's just how triaging works. Compliance often exists for audits rather than real risk reduction. Leadership misalignment drains budgets. It slows momentum, and we all work in technology, and we know that there's several tools out there. And so really this concept is to align the business outcomes. That's the end goal, no matter if you're an engineer or in the leadership position, is whatever you're doing for the business has to be able to align to a business outcome. We're going to talk about treating zero trust as a shared objective, and how we can use fractional leadership to fill strategy and execution gaps. So we got a list of problems here, and then we obviously have a list of fixes that go throughout the environments. Let's ground this into reality. Most teams are getting hit from 4 different directions at a time. The first is resourcing, open roles, skills, folks wearing 2, 3, 4, 5 hats, and that drives a lot of burnout and slow delivery. The second is threat landscape, ransomware, supply chain attacks, insider threat, and now AI-enabled phishing. These are evolving faster and faster than legacy patterns and point tools. Third is going to be compliance driven. There's more audits, there's more controls, there's more evidence, tighter timelines, expanding requirements for customers and regulators. And finally, ROI pressure, boards and executives that want measurable results, less downtime, fewer incidents, faster audits, and a clear tie and understanding to business outcomes. Let's pick up. We've got some statistics down here on the bottom. When you guys get the slide deck, the references will be in there, but these aren't just kind of made up numbers. This is an actuality. There was a point in my work time, and there's still times today when I get called into an incident, it's firefighting, and I go 3, 4, 5, 6 days, sometimes pretty strong. So, the fact that we have a gap in skilled, trained cybersecurity professionals, we have people that are getting burned out. The compliance landscape is changing. Everything is compliance driven, or quite a bit, very heavy compliance driven these days. And just overall cyber risk keeps increasing. It's not going to change. It's not going to slow down. Let's go to our second poll, Andy, here. What pressure most limits your ability to advance zero trust or compliance initiatives in your organization?
Oh man, the B word has a slight lead.
It does. I think that's fairly common, though. I think those two are two very huge pain points.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think those two kind of just help to compound, the escalating threat landscape.
All right. You going in that poll? All right. So as we get going into here, I'm going to kind of set some baseline understanding here. So we can, we'll, as we continue on, it makes sense as we go. So as times have changed and evolved, we're used to people using these labels very loosely, but they've got very different meanings. And so to start, a fractional, which seems to be the new buzzword, these days, it's been around at least for the last 3-ish years in other C-level positions like CFO, CEO, and it's been picking up slowly, but on a very steep climb the last year or two with technology executives. So fractional leader is embedded.
Oh,
They're
hey,
embedded.
sorry, if I can interrupt you real quick. I just saw Zach had commented also complexity of environment is one of their major factors as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
just
yeah. That's another good one.
yeah, that and Vince shared that's often seen as a cost center, which probably would fall back under the budget option.
It is, and we're going to talk about cost centers here later on. So,
Cool.
all right. So, fractional leader is an embedded part-time individual. The biggest difference is they own the delivery. They write the plan and they run it. They sit in all the meetings. They direct. They move the work, and they're measured on the milestones. This is really gravitated and perfect when you need execution really quick, and you don't have the headcount to hire, or not necessarily that budget to hire somebody at a full capacity. The next one's a virtual role, which is a lot of us are very familiar with is a VCIO, a VCTO, VCISO. It's meant to be advisory. We're the advisor, we're the coach. We help guide that plan, but we don't have the authority like we would in the fractional role. And it's also less time, and that would be to be expected in that. And then full-time executive owns the whole function, budget, hiring, long-term maturity, and cross-functional influences. And you typically you'll hire this when a program needs durable ownership at a scale. But they can be very expensive these days. And being in the industry of being through MSPs and service providers and a lot of small businesses, SMB, mid-market, even startups, they're not going to be able to afford, full-time executives, especially at the expense that they would want to be at, right? So we go on. There's three major pieces here for each of these. So we'll start with accountability. Fractional leadership is built to be flexible. If you've got a C level technology leader, okay. Fractional leaders meant to plug in and run a work stream or accelerate the delivery. If there's an open seat, fractional leader can act as that executive, so work doesn't stall. So it works both ways. We can complement somebody that's already hired, or we can take on that full role and keep it going. The virtual role is a little bit different. It's guidance, it's reviews, coaching. They keep the guardrails on, but it doesn't. It may not move things as quickly, depending on again budget, the authority. Remember, from a virtual standpoint, you can't just go hire a bunch of people. You may not have the right approval to do that. You got to get the right leadership involved to do that. To get that approval. And then a full-time employee owns the whole function. The same thing as a fractional leader, just at a larger budget scale. But they all handle the budget, the hiring, the long-range maturity, cross-functional. And I've been really tracking fractional leadership the last 2 years in the technology space. And a lot of teams are starting to use fractional to execute when they hire, and then eventually transition to an FTE for more long-term. That's great for, let's say, a startup. And then once they finally get product to delivery or whatever their business is doing, then it will make sense to do that. I've seen it the other way too. They've just retained fractional folks. They keep them in there maybe for a period of time, and then they transition to an advisory role, or they stay on as an advisor. Sure, they've hired the full-time employee as well. Time and cadence. So fractional will typically be very much engaged. You're not going to be there every single day, but you're going to do some commitment during the week, and you're going to start your weekly, operating rhythms and meeting with the teams and leadership. Virtual, you probably are going to, anywhere between 5 and 10 hours, depending on how big the organization is and what your commitment is. And then a full-time employee obviously is 980 type of schedule. So artifact and deliverables, fractional roadmaps, policies, control maps, vendor selection, change management, virtual roles will provide the recommendations, review, board ready summaries, and then the full-time employee gets to do everything. So let's start with where we used to be. And a lot of this is going to resonate with quite a bit of you because it's still very predominantly out in the world these days. The old way of thinking was castle and moat. We trusted the inside. We pulled everyone through a VPN. They landed on a flat network or a VLAN network. that maybe had access to everything and it wasn't segmented correctly. And then all the traffic was backhauled to a data center, possibly. The core assumption was very simple. If you're on the network, you were trusted. We clearly know today that failed. The trust decision is based on a location, not the identity or the device health these days. You get one phish user, you get one infected laptop, everything goes sideways. Hallway is wide open, and the blast radius gets big. The backhaul adds latency and support pain. You may not have all the logging you need. Audits and investigations are very difficult. We're in a world that we focus a lot around IoT and OT now. Plants and facilities run on flat segments. HMIs, PLCs, readers, broad reach. Vendors typically will use a VPN into those networks all day and sit there. And you have so many tools and so many things that are that can be uncontrollable because you can't control what's on their endpoint if you don't manage it. A compromised engineering system can walk from an office to a plant, and you have a full exposure. This is why we talk about zero trust. There's a lot of myths. There's a lot of back and forth around zero trust. However, there is the competencies, the fundamentals for zero trust are the same across the board, and you'll see in a lot of different compliance frameworks, they either have adopted zero trust controls or they're slowly adding them in. We live in a time where we're in the SaaS world. Those have different controls. Verge is inconsistent. There's not one tool that does it all. So the old model, trust where you are. The new model that we're going to get to in a second is going to verify who you are, what you're using, what you're asking for on every request. Zero trust shifts from identity, shifts to identity and device posture as the first entry point. Access is specific to an app or a service and not the whole network. This reduces attack surface and blast radius and lateral movements. It also helps cleanly map your audit controls. And quite honestly, it fits the modern reality. Remote work, SaaS, cloud, and it makes it easier for partners to work together with organizations. So now here is a really just easy diagram to try to digest here. The core idea is to verify every request, grant least privilege, and connect the user to one application instead of the whole network. We've heard this term, and for a lot of you probably have already heard a lot of this. And it's not going away. It's good to reinforce these conversations. But in a zero trust model, we want to assume breach. We want to assume there's a compromise and limit what that device can get access to. A failure should have a very small blast radius. Every request gets checked in for identity, device health. There's other context. If the context changes, the policy changes, the access changes.
Hey, Matt. Sorry,
Dave.
real quick. Are you the artist for this?
I am not. I had this in my pocketbook from some collaboration that I had seen from another person in the past.
Okay, I just didn't know if you got credit for it.
I cannot
I'm
take the
digging
credit
the
on
stick
this.
figures. I apologize. I digress. Sorry, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, so access is per application. There's no flat network to be able to get access to. And traffic is all inspected in line versus after the fact, out of band. And then the threats are stopped before they even really start. There's no hairpinning through a data center. users go straight to the application in the cloud or to that particular resource. Auditors like this, and entitlements match job roles, session logs are per application, and evidence for control testing are easier to collect. It just has so many different positive. Now, don't get me wrong, it is not a walk in the park. You cannot walk into an organization and say, you know what, we're going to a zero trust model today. You can, depending on your organization, the size, you're gonna set the business. It's not gonna go smoothly. You have to have planning. It requires planning, no matter how big or small. And that's the other, thing I think that is commonly misconception is we're a smaller org. That doesn't make this process any easier. It actually probably takes about the same amount of legwork. Sure, the bigger the organization, there is going to be a lot more complexity, but you got to do policies. You got to enroll devices into management. You've got to put that architecture and design in place, no matter what size of an organization you are.
Would you say, just my own curiosity to try and put it into context, would you say that kind of the path forward or the roadmap is relatively consistent in what's advised, but timing will be varied based on obviously resources, budget, time, and size of organization? Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it would. Zero Trust, is the latest and greatest, in my opinion, today of what is the example we want to set. That's the roadmap for now. I remember when before Zero Trust was really the hype and buzzword, we were talking about, using CASB, and that was the entry point a couple years ago. And then, Zero Trust followed right behind it. And it just started to pick up, and it's just going to keep going. We all grew up in technology, for a lot of us, 80s, 90s, 2000s. That was beautiful, in my opinion, in one day, because we thought we were the, best thing to slice bread, because we knew what we were doing. We could build networks. And then, everyone decided to say, we're going to start, hacking everybody, and then start posing all these security threats even more. And it's needed to change that shift. And I think the fact that we have the shift from an on-prem model, which isn't going to go away anytime soon. There is most definitely going to be a scenarios that you're hybrid for quite some time. But a lot of organizations, depending on, do you have people in offices? Do you have people remote? That shifts the decisions whether you're going to be on-prem with equipment and worry about CapEx expenses, or are we going to shift it and have maybe a higher OpEx monthly expense to do SaaS, and do virtual machines in the cloud, or whatever it might be. So I think for the time being, this is the alignment it's going to go towards, Dave. And it's just going to keep evolving. There's going to be something new in the next, 5 years, next less than 5 years. There's going to be another coin term in our alphabet soup here of acronyms. As we keep just expanding on in time.
Cool.
So this is why Zero Trust matters across the board. We've talked about it. It's network access, identity-based access, no VPNs. A lot of the legacy VPNs goes away at this point with a Zero Trust infrastructure. Did you have a question, Dave?
No.
Okay.
No.
Data loss prevention. When I started my career, data loss, DLP was never a big thing. And it probably should have been, growing up in the career. But it really was not a big thing in the industries I worked in. We worked about access control and restricting things, but now that, again, insider threat, people taking data from a company to go to a competitor. Now it's so much easier without visibility on a device, especially if users are using a non-company managed device, which is why it's a very big thing that I'm a very big proponent that you lock this down to you give your vendors a platform, you give them an environment, give them a virtual machine to log into if they need to, give them a dedicated machine if they needed to. Keep your data where you can physically hold on to it. Otherwise, you're just not going to be able to hold on to it. We've got CASB, we've got inline controls, you've got sandboxing, browser isolation. The list goes on and on. And a lot of these, you guys will see, some of this terminology is not new. It's just reframed, it's reused in the zero trust models. But we've seen these terms in firewalls. We're all used to the 7 layers. We're used to advanced threat protection and SSL and TLS inspection, right? So it's nothing new. It is just a different way that we're going to look at it and how we control and we push out those protections. Next is we talk about posture management. Do we have the right configs in place? Posture management is going to go in several different directions. You have cloud posture management. Is your AWS configured and hardened to CIS or NIST? Are you using a product that allows you to do posture management for Active Directory, Microsoft 365, Google Workspace? Chances are probably not, or very, very small percentage of people probably are using that. I would say probably, unless you're a really sophisticated small business that has some of this stuff, you probably don't see a lot of these tools unless they're in a mid-market space. But that's where partners come in because partners are working the deals with these vendors to be able to bring some of this posture management stuff down to the SMB market. And it's primarily, what we do. So you got continuous compliance monitoring. You got security posture management for SaaS tools, policy-based access, and then logging and visibility for all of this. Again, starting in careers, security was never the first footprint that you focused on. You focused on making sure people could do their jobs and how IT things need to work. You never need to worry about a log server logging all that stuff, at least in an SMB space, depending on your industry. Now, that's the new normal. Everything we're talking about is all the new normal as of the last 2 to 5 years as we've evolutionized security. And the threat landscape has escalated and evolved. Experience. How is your users' experience being remote? Are they having issues? Are they getting to stuff? Is it slow? Are they downloading a 50 gig file because it's a video file or a database? We have deception technology that is meant to do exactly what that means. Deception. Is to send decoys out and trick threat actors from the real actual spots you want to hit. We're in a world of AI and machine learning. It's in the news. We hear about it. We talk about it all day, every day. That's just going to do nothing but continue to grow. Integration with ticketing systems and logging systems, SIMs, SIEMs, however you want to pronounce it. Policy automation and unified admin consoles. One thing I absolutely hate is having so many tools that I have so many different things I have to log into. But we also have not mastered unified admin consoles across the board. However, there are, in the zero trust model, there are certain all these different vendors and whatnot that build their solutions all typically have a unified admin console. And then last last set of points is we got reduced appliance and reduced appliance and infrastructure costs. That was, talking about the on-prem type of space. We've got risk reduction by eliminating attack surfaces. Scalability. We talked about hybrid work. The one of those sweet things of doing a zero trust model that has been not necessarily coined, but it's been talked about as a selling point. Salespeople, are really good at doing sales sometimes, and it's nice that some of these vendors have, they've talked the talk and they've been able to walk the walk as well, especially around M&A. M&A is big right now, especially in the MSP business. I'm so involved on that side that I hear of new M&As every week in the service provider side. And I'm sure it's the same way with SMBs and mid markets and whatnot. But being able to deploy an endpoint agent to a system that you may not manage, but now they're enforced with all your policies that all the rest of your org is using. And yes, you got to make your tweaks to align to that business model. Got to make their exceptions and do what you need to. But guess what? You can roll them in fairly quickly. I've been around a few other people that have done some very large scale deployments in organizations with zero trust technology. And we're talking full deployment for, 10, 20, 30,000 endpoints in a few weeks, less than a month. So it definitely is a good selling point to boards, to leadership, to get this going, especially if you're in the M&A space. Now, this is where security really gets real for audits, or mapping identity, access, segmentation to the control requirements. There are tons of controls. I'm not even going to go through them. There's tons of frameworks. We all heard them. There's HIPAA, there's high trust, there's PCI, NIST, CIS, et cetera. There's a never ending of them, right? And they constantly change. In doing all of these different changes, and when we blend these all together to build a solution, we're moving from a one-time checklist to continuous monitoring and readiness for the compliance side of it. You get leadership alignment. Is the difference between the paperwork and the practice, and the payoff is you have fewer audit surprises, and you have stronger defenses every day. You know that things are locked down. You're confident. And we also live in a space that this isn't set it and forgive it. This is always moving. This is always changing. You should be constantly testing your security. You should be constantly testing to make sure what you have in place actually works. In the security, realm, we'll talk about doing tabletop exercises. I think we've talked about it on a webinar in the past. These are fairly common. This is truly to move beyond talking the talk and walking the walk during a tabletop exercise. So that way your organization is prepared to, one, be ready on the compliance side for those auditors, and you have everything ready to go. You're not scrambling, or you have a gap and you can't provide services. I've seen where things have gotten missed. I've been involved in a lot of compliance audits that are there's a lot of scrutiny. And if you don't put evidence down on it, there's adverse effects. Everything I think has a cause and effect, no matter which way you look at it. But aligning, these practices and these core competencies to compliance. It's just, again, this is it's an evolution of our time, and at the end of the day, it just makes us more secure. And it isn't just checking a box. We've got the evidence to back it up. Here's how we have some common objections and how we can reframe them. So zero trust is complex and is disruptive. We can easily reframe that and phrase it by business priority, and we don't have to rip and replace. There's, me personally, and everything that I'm involved in, it doesn't matter if I'm in a fractional role with an org directly, it doesn't matter if I'm working with a service provider and their customers. No one wants to waste money, period. And we live in a very expensive world, and everything costs a lot of money. And so that's one of the nice things about aligning a lot of these different strategic, the strategic pieces is we're not forced to rip and replace until the time is right. Our intention is always to make sure that that organization gets the most and maximize their ROI for what they have spent before we really need to replace it. Next one is we already have a full-time executive handling this. Great. Fractional leadership, provides the oversight and bridges the silos, complementing and not replacing. We talked about this where, if you've got C-levels, great, let us help out. Or maybe it's you have a CIO, but you don't have a CISO. You bridge one on, and then everyone can be collaborative and work together. It's there's a lot of knowledge out there. I don't toot my own horn, but I am very knowledgeable. But even then, I still don't know everything. And I still rely on quite a bit, a few people that I bounce ideas off of and talk to. So collaboration is a good one. I also think that that's another turning point as time has evolved as well, is we're so used to silos. Corporate environments are very siloed. This team handles this set of servers and that's it. No one else does. Then you have different teams and whatnot. And if we remained in this time that we had silos, all these different departments, different business units that are all completely siloed, imagine how many security teams you're going to need to have, or IT people you're going to need to have between each of those silos. And it's quite a bit, rather than let's pull back. Let's think big picture here. How can we make this better for the business? Again, this isn't one size fits all. This doesn't fit sometimes in every situation, but you try to do the best that you can across the board. There is some middle ground. So I would say that breaking those silos and bridging them is a very, very positive, because if they've gotten into one business unit, chances are they've probably broken into other business units if you've been attacked. So we got to think holistic. Compliance slows us down. Integrated compliance plus zero trust reduces delays, speeds up the audits, and it strengthens security simultaneously. And I think somebody brought this up earlier. Security drains budget without adding value, aka security is a cost center, IT is a cost center. We are in a service delivery model, no matter which way you look at it, whether you're in security, you're in IT, you're in compliance, it's all service. We don't make any money for the business whatsoever. We're here to protect it. And boards, leadership, they have to recognize that to realign budgets. And they have to be able to stomach that and figure that out. And one of the ways that we can do that is by reframing it to give them measurable ROI, show them the reduced risk with security, and show it as a business enabler. and just not overhead and just an expense. I think automation's big nowadays. That helps speed us up on a lot of the lower end things that we need to do. So, you add all of these together. Again, it's not an overnight thing, but you start building this strategy to focus on these 4 puzzle pieces in your organization. Especially if you're a larger org, mid-market size, let's say, all these pieces will play a hand. Even SMBs, this plays, in a big part. So let's go to pull 3, Andy. Looking ahead, where do you want the most progress by year end? About 4 months, 1 quarter left, roughly. You want stronger leadership accountability, whether it's fractional or an internal person, compliance that improves real security, advancing zero trust, or proving security delivers business value. I knew compliance was going to be number 1, Dave.
Yeah, it's kind of running away with it at this point. And I was going to say that I agree with everything you're saying, but there have been times where I've had the opportunity to work with an organization that was very ad hoc to begin with. And once you started getting just foundational things like asset inventory and software licensing, um, uh, accounted for, there we found cost savings because there were just an excess of licenses that never weren't being used, and somebody would just rubber stamp renewals because they didn't know or people didn't know to ask. And so there have been some ways where it can complement the bottom line in those ways. But I do agree with you that foundationally we are in the service industry, and the best way we can deliver within that while reducing risk is our optimal path forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there
Yeah,
you
well, that
go.
number went down a little bit, yeah, but it still took the lead. All right. So what am I talking about here? So let's talk about key takeaways, solving this puzzle. Um, Modern security is not a tool problem, nor is it a checkbox problem. It's leadership, it's alignment, it's budgets. When we go and connect all these different pieces between leadership, compliance, zero trust, and business outcomes, we'll finally be able to shape and get results that are measurable, defensible, and built to be long term as we continue to evolve in this industry. This is a perfect segue because as we talk about all these different pieces, it's a good reminder that we're coming in October, which is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And this year's theme is Stay Safe Online, which is, I feel like that's a given to kind of no brainer, I guess, because it's always what we should be thinking about. But really, CISA is putting this together to connecting a core 4 habit between strong passwords, MFA, patching, and reporting scams. And it really is going to help fill the bigger security puzzle that we've been talking about today. And it really just complemented everything you said about the fundamentals. Asset management, making sure we have strong passwords and a password manager, MFA, making sure that your systems are patched to the best of their ability, and then be able to recognize and report scams. I mean, I see so many people, still doing security awareness training. I still see their account get compromised because they fall for a phishing attack, and the fact that they're getting AI based now, they're going faster. They're getting more sophisticated. I think one of the biggest phishing ones recently, over the last, probably year or so, was a big one around DocuSign. And you get a DocuSign email, and you would click at it, and you would jump through a couple different URLs as they flicker on the address bar, and then you get prompted to log into Microsoft or wherever. But I will say, recently, in the last probably 2 or 3 months, and I'm the proponent here, that this has happened to. Um, I was actually getting phishing calendar invites. So I would get a calendar invite thrown on my calendar for 15 minutes from now, on a very sensitive topic, finances or whatever it was. But I've probably gotten half a dozen of them in the last couple months. It's really bizarre, and so that's just something we haven't seen. It's probably something that a lot of security algorithms aren't paying attention to yet. They're going to start if they're not already, but it's keeping everybody on their toes, and everyone has to do their part. Everyone has to pay attention. You know, this isn't, in my opinion, this is just not a requirement. It's just, come on, everyone just needs to think about it, slow down, and let's just make sure that we're doing the right thing. So to wrap this up, these aren't just IT hygiene tasks. They're the foundation for zero trust. They're baked into every compliance framework. They require leadership alignment to become culture. Nothing's going to change in environments unless it comes from the top down, no matter what people do. Um, no matter how many checklists you do, if you don't get buy-off by senior leadership, it's probably not going to happen, or be very slow to get implemented. And so by having this turn into a culture and not checklists, it's going to directly protect business outcomes, and it's going to help reduce the breaches. It's going to reduce your downtime, and it's going to reduce lost trust. How much trust in your organization do you think a leader has lost, or an engineer has lost after they've said something and it's gone the wrong way? There has been a level of trust that has been misplaced at that point. And that's okay, because that's how all of us learn, by mistakes, and it's how we manage that. It's a risk, right? And how we manage that risk. Um, I mean, we've seen the extremes over the years. SolarWinds, CISOs getting sued. People have lost jobs, people have lost their livelihoods. And some of it maybe they had no part in necessarily, but they were in that position of being accountable and responsible for that. So it's really a lot of the implementation. What we're talking about has to come down from the top down. So you got to have your buy-in from your board. You have to have your buy-in from your leadership, and go from there. So at the end of the day, my message is simple: small, consistent actions will scale into maturity. Really, without these core four, advanced strategies aren't going to stand. I mean, this is like the number one thing that you do when you start an organization, unfortunately. So everything else we've discussed, it's all achievable. It takes time. Sometimes we can move it faster depending on your size, your org, but it's not out of your reach. It's not out of any organization's reach. And if it is, then maybe we need to you need to relook at vendors, relook at the strategy that you're trying to implement. Maybe it's a realignment with your leadership team of, okay, how much have you guys been putting into our budget, and let's reallocate that. So with that, that's what we have for today. Appreciate everybody's time kind of going through that. We have any other questions, Dave?
Yeah, I do. We had received there aren't any, there were some good comments in the chat, so we've stayed current on those. But there were a couple of questions we got through the community separately that I wanted to run by you. And one is, if it's a small, mid-sized business, maybe it's a startup, been around, um, where a fractional CISO is probably going to be their best next step. They're not large enough to want to bring somebody in, but want to do the right thing. Do you have any recommendations on where those organizations should start, or what to kind of look out for or look for?
Um, yeah, so I think it's it's not a straightforward answer. It's I'll say do your due diligence, do your research. When you're looking for a fractional um, executive, you want to do the same thing when you're essentially interviewing somebody. You want to see what their experience is like, what they've done, what they haven't done. Um, it's really going to kind of conduct kind of an interview mindset doing that. But reputation is everything, um, in my opinion. And so I think it's just make sure you do your part, and investigate and research what you're looking for. And I think that really depends on defining what your business goals are. What's the goal of the business
Sure.
that's shaping the need for a CISO? I mean, we obviously can assume that a CISO is probably a good starting point because everything is got a good security starting point. But there's plenty of CIOs or CTOs or CISOs that they're I don't think there's one person necessarily. There might be a small percentage, but majority, there is not one executive that can't intermingle in a different role. They're been around security, they've been around IT, they've been around development, and so they know those skills or they know what they're looking for in those areas. So I think they can help complement as well. But I think it kind of goes back to what the business objectives are for the company.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, the due diligence is foundational, and it's going to be, there's a respectable amount of them out there, so you want to know, in if you know your business and you know the goals of your business, you're going to find some CISOs that are probably more familiar or aligned with, or have more experience in where
Yeah.
you're trying to go. And the other thing I would add is just uh, their ability to communicate, to leadership up and down, is going to be almost as important as their knowledge and experience. So
It goes back to an Evan moment, right? A lot of us have been around, and for some time. And communication is the big thing, but it's also learning how to talk to the business. And one of his phrases that he's gone out and said is, you know, the language for the business is accounting. You have to understand, be able to speak their language.
yeah,
Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get stuff done.
yeah, no, good point. And the other question kind of ties into that, but before even saying what would a good fractional CISO, the criteria for matching, um but if an organization's interested in just kind of getting started, do you have any recommendations on where they could go for the first step?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of what they're going to do, I would say I think I've seen it a few different ways being done, but I would go down the path of a strategy session of some sort, because that's really going to be able to. I think it's gonna help both sides. It's gonna help the fractional executive, the fractional CISO, or whatever role is. They're gonna be able to understand the business. It's also going to be able to flip it around, whoever's working in that business be able to establish that relationship with the fractional person, be able to understand, does it sound like this guy knows what he's talking about, and let him come back with a strategy, and build that out. And so I think a strategy session is always a good way to do it, no matter what,
Sure.
whether, even when I get brought into engagements, it doesn't matter to me whether I do a strategy session or I jumped in directly in an engaged environment. I'm still going to have to write out that strategy no matter what. Um, this doing a strategy session kind of helps out. It kind of, like dating. You make sure that it works for both of you guys. And worst case,
Mhm.
then you've just got you've only had a small expense at least on a strategy session rather than a commitment, or retainer for a longer period, and you don't get what you want. Strategy
Sure.
sessions are always good. Risk assessments, we've talked about those in the IT field for years.
Yeah, well, the strategy session could almost be like its own flavor of a tabletop
And
to give it some structure to be able to kind of
you can't, I mean,
walk
yeah,
through.
because strategy session typically will have dedicated time working with that org, and those folks, interviewing different leaders, depending on the size of the business,
Hmm.
the development teams, talk to your accounting teams, whatever. Um, but you have to understand their business to be able to build that strategy out. No one knows every business, top down. So
Sure.
it's going to take some time to learn and understand that.
Yeah. No, no, dude, that's solid. Thank you. Those were the questions that I had, and it does look like we are current on what's on the chat questions. So if anybody else does have any other questions, oh, I'm seeing we're actually just clipped the hour. If anybody does have any other questions, drop them in the chat real quick and we can answer them. Otherwise, I think we're good and can wrap. And dude, thank you. You
Yeah,
put a lot of time in putting this together. There's a lot of great information in there, and I just appreciate you doing that and sharing it with the community.
yeah, no, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And I got my QR code, and you guys can get in touch with me. Um, you know, kind of back up a little bit because I think I rushed through my own intro. I've been doing this for almost 20 years, everybody. So I've got a lot of different flavors. So not only do I do fractional work, but I also work for an MSSP, based out of Tennessee in security operations. And so I'm working with partners, and architecting, strategizing constantly. So you know, connect with me on LinkedIn. You guys can see, interact with me, questions, reach out to me. No problem connecting with anybody and helping anybody out.
Awesome. And I did just drop your LinkedIn URL
Perfect.
in chat, so that's there for everybody. But other than that, man, dude, thank you again, and thanks to everybody that uh, um, has hung out, and appreciate you on both
Yeah,
sides. So thank
perfect.
you. Yeah, wish everybody else a great rest of your day and week, and we'll see you online or in person soon enough.